both myself as well as Nomades at Parc, we were like, you know what, let's bring in some local legends, people that it's not just about the results or, the medals or anything like that, but who give a lot back to community. And so one of the first names that we thought was Ray Zahab. So if we could start off, Ray, like you're, a Canadian, pretty much ultra runner, as well as you could say, traveler. Like you've done so many amazing things. You've been in some movies too. Just in 2 minutes or less, like who is Ray Zahab?
That's on the spot. Not too hard of a question to ask. So I guess, for lack of a better term, I'm an explorer. I'm a professional explorer. So it sounds like I'd be a mountain climber, Everest climber, that sort of thing. Instead, I've spent the last 15 years crossing close to 20,000 kilometers of the planet's hottest and coldest places, unsupported and supported. So I've ran across every large desert on this planet, with the exception of the Simpson Desert in Australia. That includes the Sahara Desert, the Patagonian Desert, the Atacama Desert, yada, yada, yada. But I've also been to the South Pole in world record time, on foot without skis. I've done Arctic expeditions and that sort of thing. So that's what I do from an exploration perspective, right? But, no, I appreciate that, I do. I really do. But more importantly for me, I'm the founder of a charity called Impossible to Possible. I'm wearing the shirt now. And in past, I was a race organizer here in Gatineau Park, lived here for 20 years. And those races and everything I do, my own expeditions, the guiding that I do with my guiding company, etc., all supports this charity. And we take young people, 16 to 21 years of age, on their own expeditions around the world, 100% free of cost. So there's no charge for them to go, and we're volunteers in that. And we actually have 3 local youth going next month in May to a region of the Mojave Desert to do some exploration and learn about extreme weather and blah, blah, blah. But it's all free. I mean, that's the raddest part of what I do is my volunteer job. So, yeah.
I love that. And
thank you.
Something that I find interesting about that too is like you're big on, inspiring, educating, but giving back, giving back to community. You just talked about, now your latest expedition, which is really neat, really rad, as you kind of said. But, I want to rewind a bit, I think in the 2000s, right, you were part of this pretty epic movie, and so if we could go there, I think you know what I'm talking about. There were some legends like, Matt Damon, who was part of it, and some other ultra runners, and that was, a part of your life at one point. So can you walk us through a little bit of that?
Yeah, so in 2006 through 2007, which I know seems like a ridiculously long time ago, and it is, but 2006, 2007, 2 buddies of mine and I spent 111 days running 70 kilometers a day, so a total of about 7,500 across the Sahara Desert, so from coast to coast across Africa. We were very lucky to have Matt Damon make a documentary film about it. So for the people here that are too young to know who Matt Damon is, he's a Hollywood actor, okay? So he made a documentary, and the goal of the documentary film was to not only tell the story of this journey that at that time people thought was impossible. Like there's no way anyone can run 7,000 kilometers. Now, if I told you, hey, I'm gonna run across the Sahara, you'd be like, that's great, I think I'll go next week too. But back then, it really wasn't, that type of ultra running was not really sort of a thing, I guess you could say. So at any rate, we run across the Sahara Desert, and this film gets made, and it was in theaters everywhere, and it was Matt Damon used that platform as a way to fundraise for water projects in North Africa through the regions that we ran through. And they literally raised like $5 million for water projects all over North Africa. So it was really cool. And for me, in being part of it, like when I reached the edge of the Red Sea on day 111 with 2 ultra running legends, this guy named Kevin Lin from Taiwan, who was a 6.5 hour 100K road guy, and Charlie Angle, who's done all kinds of stuff. At that point, when we reached the edge of the Red Sea, end of the expedition, I'd only been running 3.5 years. So I wasn't a lifelong runner. Like I'd picked up running just a few years before that. And 7 years before that, I was smoking a pack a day. So I was an unhealthy guy. But I did this crazy thing with these guys, right? I ran across the Sahara. And by the time we were done and the film came out, I realized how potent adventure is in being able to share a story, to learn about one another, but most importantly, learn about ourselves. So when we're out there challenging ourselves, as everybody here understands, because you're all runners, when you get out there and you get after it and you push yourself on those hard days, that feeling of what it's like at the end, it can suck for a while, but what you learn about yourself through the process is extraordinary. And I thought after the Running the Sahara project, to answer your question in the longest way possible, that at the end of that thing, I was going to spend the rest of my life doing expeditions and somehow leveraging those to be more valuable than just me narcissistically trying to go to the South Pole. That there had to be a value proposition, and that was connecting the message to youth that we can be all of us can be extraordinary, you know?
Right. And then, love that. And then, so moving off of that, like, you know, when you go through these temperatures, whether it's really hot, right, like the Sahara, or whether it's really cold, like in the Arctic, you know, that's pretty extreme, right? Both of those conditions. And, you know, typically we always hear the expression, you know, like when it comes like there's no such thing as bad weather, but bad preparation, you know? But you talked about even like, let's say in that previous movie, right? Like it was a whole different time frame where maybe we didn't know the same way with, you know, how to eat properly or equipment, you know, evolution of equipment of what we have. But what I'm getting at is, what is the biggest learnings that you've learned of how to prepare yourself for the extreme hot and extreme cold?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I mean, from the physical, I'll get to the physical perspective because that one's the easiest. I think that from the mental and emotional perspective, when you're training for something like he's training for the Hard Rock 100, it's going to be ridiculously difficult. But if Richard approaches this training with humility, then he's going to learn about everything that he needs to do in order to achieve the goal properly. So I've learned from adventure through 40 expeditions, doing things all over the world, that each time I approach an expedition, I learn from what went wrong in the past, and I push that forward to the future. So remaining humble in the way that I approach my expeditions and my planning and my training is critical. So that mental aspect is actually the hardest part. Actually, I say, like what I do is 90% mental, the other 10% is all in my head. And that applies to everybody in anything that we go after that's very difficult. If you sign up to run a 100-mile race or a 50-mile race, I'd like to see the person put their hand up and say it's not going to hurt. You know it's going to hurt when you do. You sign up and you're like, well, this is going to hurt like hell, but it's going to be amazing, the experience, right? The physical part of it is a little more streamlined. I'm very adherent to what I'm preparing for. Like I have a plan and I stick to it. I would have loved to have gone for the run tonight and I was like super tempted, but I'm like, no, I'm training for something I've got coming up, my own project, not the youth expedition. So I've got a couple more projects this year that I'm training for. I don't want to frig it up. So I'm training exactly the way I need to. So sport specificity is critical. If you're going to go someplace that's extreme heat or extreme cold or extreme high, you have to prepare for that. High, use an altitude machine. Extreme heat, use a sauna. Go to the extreme cold in the Arctic when I'm on an unsupported expedition for 40 days in the darkness of winter. I'm going to eat 90% fat because that's way more efficient. So I get myself into ketosis for 6 months. I train specifically for what it is that I want to do, you know, because I attack each expedition like it's my last.
Right. And so that's a really interesting answer, I think, because, but at the same time, it's so simple. It's like, well, your rule is to follow your program, stay in your lane, right? Which is very valuable. But a question I have is like, I'm curious to ask, what is, when you think about when you go on some of these expeditions, you must have some stories of like the good that go really well and you make that, let's say, 100-miler, or also, let's say, the bad and the ugly. So when you think back of stories right now of different expeditions, which ones were good, which one were bad, and which one were ugly? Or maybe they're even all three sometimes.
Well, you know what? I'm going to illustrate the fact of what I'm trying to say with an example of someone, and then I'll go to like some stories of expeditions. But is everybody familiar with Elliot Cardin? Has everybody heard of Elliot Cardin? So I coach Elliot, and I met Elliot because we sponsor his coffee. We give him coffee with our coffee company. And the sweetest guy you've ever met. And remember this guy. If you're not following him on social media, follow him because he will be one of the best runners in the world. This guy's amazing. But he went through a period, he's young, 20s. He went through a period where he couldn't finish a race. And I met him in that period. And I said, but do you know how to breathe? And he said, what are you talking about? I said, can you go out and run and only breathe through your nose? Nothing else. Just go and run and breathe through your nose. And he said, why would I do that? And I said, because you haven't even thought of it. Like, try it. It's two different things. There's a disconnect. And so he spent the first 3 months of his training learning to breathe through his nose, almost like meditation and reconnecting with his body. Because when you're forced to breathe through your nose while you're running, you're forced to reconnect with yourself and find out who you are and what's working and what isn't. And then be able to say, oh, you know what, my elbow feels funny today. I would have never noticed that before. You know what I'm saying? So to go to expeditions. When I'm on expeditions, of course, there's the physical difficulties of having blisters, being chased by wild boars on 2 different continents, which has actually happened to me. You know, crazy polar bears, you know, all kinds of crazy things have happened. But I think, did you want, like, what's the worst thing that's all right? Like those kind of stories?
Let's hear the good, the bad, the ugly.
So, like, one of the worst things that happened, so I was doing an Arctic expedition, and it was with an Italian teammate of mine, Stefano Gregoretti. He's kind of a well-known ultra runner from Italy. And we met each other and became really good buddies and found that we could really work with each other very well on expeditions, having different strengths. Although he doesn't speak very much English, especially at this time, and I don't speak very good Italian. I add I and O to many of my words to try and make Italian words. Sometimes it works, you know. So we go on this Arctic expedition where we're going to cross 3 regions of the Arctic in February by 3 different modes of transportation. So on foot with snowshoe, unsupported, in one area. A second region on skis, unsupported, pulling sleds. Third region on fat bikes. And in the first region that we were crossing some mountains in Labrador. It was like minus 45. We're going up through this river basin, and I had the most experience. So I was moving first, and I was testing ice. And I'll try to condense my story because I tell really long stories. But we were going up through this canyon, and the canyon got narrower and narrower and narrower. It was maybe from me to the fire pit wide at one point, which means lots of current. And it was just rock walls, like 100-foot high rock walls. And we're in this slot canyon, we're going up, and I'm testing the ice, and I could see that it opened up maybe 50 feet away. And I said to Stefano, it's going to be okay up there, but I want to test this one last area. So because the ice had no natural shoreline to adhere to, we unhooked our sleds. And we had a dog with us as well for polar bears. And when the dog and Stefano and the sleds were right here, and I took 2 steps forward and poof, I broke in. So I was on overflow, and it was an unusual winter that they had in that region we found out later, where it was warm, cold, warm, cold, warm, cold. So there was these pockets of overflow. And I broke down through some overflow into these rapids, and the water was immediately pulling me under the ice, 2 kilometers down. Right? So I climbed like this, and now I'm about to go all the way down, but underneath the ice. And the first thing I thought of when I went in was, I'm never going to see my kids again. This is it. I'm done, right? So I thought, I had my boots unbuckled, my snowshoes were undone. I thought, you know, if I could just get my boots off, I don't give a shit if I ever walk again, if I could see my kids again. Like, that's why I don't care. Like, let my feet freeze off, right? I just got to get out of this hole. And I was pulling, and I was pulling, and I was pulling. Could get my boots off. And in frustration, I pulled as hard as I could with my right leg, and my snowshoe came out of the hole, and the crampon hooked the other side of the hole that was kind of like in a triangle shape. So my foot is up here, and I'm like, well, this is going to hurt like later for sure, you know? But I pushed against it, and I was able to roll far enough away that Stefano could reach down on his stomach and pull on the top of my backpack. Thank God I wasn't tied into the sleds. We're always tied in together. When we're in crevasse country, we're always tied in. We were not tied in. We would have all died. The dog, me, everything. We would have all gone down the river because everything would have collapsed. And we walked out 2 days in a snowstorm because we were dropped by helicopter initially. There was no rescue. So I took my boots. I had an emergency down suit on my sled. I put it on. But in that moment, I was laughing because I could not believe that I didn't die. Like, I just could not friggin' believe that I was alive. And Stefano thought I lost my marbles, right? So we spent 2 days hiking out to where some Inuit friends of ours, hunters, were coming from the other end. And I called my Savon and said, hey, boys, you got to come and get us. Like, we're stuck we were in a snowstorm and everything. So my boots were frozen to my feet. All my toes were frostbitten. They were all like little black sausages, all my toes, right? And I thought for sure I'm losing my toes. Toes never came off. And a week later, we changed our gear out. And I said to Stefano, you know what? I want to keep going. Because he had challenged me in the tent while we were waiting for the hunters to come get us. He said, okay, so you survived. And I said, well, you know, that's an understatement. And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know, man. I don't think I can continuing. Like, I don't know if I can do this next thing. he said, what would you tell one of the youth ambassadors on our expeditions, the youth expedition? I'd say, well, you have to reinvent yourself. You know, you'd have to reinvent. I hate moving goalposts. I'm not a goalpost mover. Shit happens on expeditions. If I say I'm going here and I don't make it to here, then I don't want to say, like, I'm not trying to be harsh, but it's a fail, right? I didn't make it to where I wanted to go. I'm not going to say, well, I didn't get to here, I got to here, right? So I said, you know, we didn't make it. We didn't accomplish our goal. And he said, but, and I said, well, then let's reinvent what we're doing. And I will go out and do the second leg. And so we completed the expedition. I skied across Baffin Island unsupported with my toes like sausages. And then we fat biked through the Northwest Territories. But the moral of the story is that as horrible and close a call as it was, I learned more from that expedition about myself in doing something that I thought I wouldn't be able to overcome than I would have if it went smoothly like most of them do. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
So telling people that story, we didn't accomplish our goal, but we accomplished a lot more. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, there was a lot of lessons learned. What are some other lessons that you've learned even just through, let's say, your time in Gatineau Park, you know, connecting with nature? I know you're someone, you really, really value nature. So what are some lessons that it has taught you?
Well, first of all, like, we live in the greatest place on earth, right? Like, I mean, think about it, Gatineau Park, where we are, right? I mean, you know what? We used to organize a race here. I was telling the boys earlier, we used to organize a race here, and it was 5 ITRA points for UTMB. And there was only one other race in Canada that had that many points. And you get those points, the way it used to work, based on a course that has elevation, a certain amount of elevation over 100 miles. And we have that elevation here. Like, on my training runs, I don't know about everybody else, but I'm getting like 800 to 1,000 feet, like 300 meters every 10K on a training run, especially on the unmarked trails in Gatineau Park. You can't do that anywhere else. You can't go anywhere else. Like, where else are you gonna go? You got $1 million to stay in a hotel in Whistler, okay, well then maybe you're gonna get that living in Whistler. But here, like, we have everything, right? We have great espresso, we have bikes we can rent, and we have trails. What else do you want? We have the greatest place in the world. So what have I learned? I've learned that living here and being in Gatineau Park, our backyard never ceases to give some sort of gift of learning every single day when you're out there. I see wildlife I've never seen before. 20 years I've been living here. Like, I see, you know, I see trees differently every day. You know, I can be 20 minutes from the nation's capital of Canada, but be on the trails for 20 kilometers and see no one. It's an amazing place, right? Right? It's true.
Yeah, no, it's truly special, and I think, you know, everyone just clapping right there kind of confirms, you know, it really is, you know, not only for trail running, but just everything, right? When we think of mountain biking, climbing, snowshoeing, snowshoe running, right? Like, the list goes on. And, you know, we even know that there's another group that's special to our home here, which is, you know, Natural Fitness Lab, right? They do a lot of that too. They very versatile in terms of sports. But Ray, you know, something I'm curious to ask from here is, you know, if people right now are listening and they're like, hey, you know what, we're signed up for some events coming up, whether it's summer, whether it's fall, there's a lot of trail events in fall. And maybe it's their first, you know, like, let's say Harricana, like a larger scale event, distance, where there's a lot more endurance in terms of them, you know, pacing themselves. They don't want to DNF. They don't want to, like, it's about the journey. It's about finishing. So what would you advise, you know, someone in the crowd here that's kind of signed up for some events right now and they're training towards that just to
I would say be flexible with your training programs. So don't be so rigid. Not calling them out, but just it's the only example I can think of, like a running room marathon program. If somebody is sticking to a program like that and they miss 2 or 3 days, they may feel, what's the point? Or I got to make up for it. Or I got to this, or I got... Don't worry about rigidity. That's the beauty of trail running and being off-road as well, is that you can actually get after it and get your miles and put your time in, and it will come together for you on race day. So be flexible with your training and just get out and really enjoy yourself, especially on those longer runs. I mean, that's super critical. Strength training, flexibility, mobility, those things are super critical to anybody that's training for anything. I don't care if you're training for a 5K trail race or if you're training for a 50K or a 50 miler or a 100 miler. Strength training and mobility are critical to being injury-free. The only reason you get injured is because you don't have the flexibility or the strength to maintain your runs. And running is a very natural thing. We're built to run. So what the hell, right? It's all good. And then training your body as well to process the food and the fluids that you're going to take on during your race. So that's like the single biggest. I was just talking to somebody today who's going down, a buddy of mine who I'm helping to coach, and he's going down to do the one in Arizona that's happening, Coconut. And he eats super clean. His wife, like, they eat like they're insanely super clean eaters, and they live in Bromont. They're almost like hippie clean, like it's super clean. And I'm like, dude, you eat like a fairly balanced diet. You're going to go into those aid stations. You need to eat something that's fairly balanced. So he's going to eat pizza at the aid stations, right? Because it's kind of balanced food. But he's got to get used to eating that food because that's what's going to be available to him there. You know what I mean? So drink your knack or whatever, exact nutrition is what I use or whatever, and then get your body to process it, you know, and learn to process while you're putting the time in. Don't wait until race day and like, oh, this looks like really interesting stuff. I think I'll drink that. That's a recipe for diarrhea for sure. You know, so you don't want that to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Your body needs to get familiar.
Yeah, so adaptation, do your strength, your mobility, and be flexible with your training program. Be willing to miss days if you have to, and you can run more another time or it'll come together, but don't try to cram things.
Right. And so Ray, you know, what are some, you know, you talked about today, you know, that you have some youth expeditions coming up. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're almost done, you know, pretty much going through all of North America now, right? In terms of...
Yeah, well, for me personally, I mean, I've crossed, like I mentioned before, like all the large deserts.
Yeah.
I've still got a couple of projects left that I really want to do.
Yeah.
I've got a major, working in reverse, I've got a major Arctic expedition in March next year on Ellesmere Island, which is an Inuit, non-Inuit collaboration, which I'm really stoked about. It's over 2,000 kilometers, 45 days on the land. And then I'm doing one in South America, a transcontinental through the Amazon jungle on foot. I'll do that with Stefano. That's in December. Take about 20 days. I'll be back before Christmas because I can't miss Christmas. And then this July, I'm doing a project in the Mojave Desert in Death Valley. So last year, long story short, like I went through chemotherapy. I had a blood cancer. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. So I finished that, and then I went to Death Valley to do this project that was very personal and meaningful to me. So is everybody familiar with FKTs and all that stuff? So sometimes I like to do those things, but not say officially it's an FKT, like just know that I did it, you know what I mean? So I did a crossing of Death Valley from its most northern point in the middle of summer, completely off-road, up to the mountains, navigation, all the way through the river valley, and I finished at the Badwater Basin, the lowest point in North America. And it took me 4.5 days. That was years ago. So after chemo last year, I said, you know what? I'm gonna go and I'm gonna just destroy that time. So I went last year, and then there was like this weather anomaly. There was these south winds. It was like 58 degrees Celsius, world record temperatures. I was drinking 8 liters every 20K. I had my caches at every 20 to 30K. And I got so dehydrated, like I just couldn't continue. Like I was drinking 8 liters, like every 20. It's just like, I couldn't process anymore. So I couldn't finish. So I'm gonna go back this year and do that.
Exciting stuff, because now it's almost like, okay, it didn't work out the way you wanted last year. You're ready to go back.
Oh yeah,
again.
totally pumped.
You're ready to train
Dude, I'm
harder.
super, like I'm in great shape right now.
Yeah.
And I've been training really hard. So I'm like, and also I probably underestimated that I was like not, or overestimated maybe. I was still sick from the chemo, but I didn't realize it when I went. Because all during chemo last year, I was going on expeditions and doing stuff in between chemo treatments, right? So I thought I was kind of okay to do this, but I wasn't maybe out of the woods. So now I'm out of the woods. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And I think one last question to ask specifically on that, how do we know when, you know, to let go of maybe in a moment like that, whether it's in a race or whether it's just for fun where we're doing, you know, FKT, or sorry.
Anything, yeah.
Yeah. When is it that we know to let go of our ego and just surrender and be like, you know what, we're falling apart here?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think honestly, we tend to overthink things a lot instead of just appreciating the moment that we're in. I remember when I first started ultra running, I did a race in 2004 in Niger. It was 200 miler nonstop, and I was alone out in the middle of the desert. My feet were killing me. I was just a bag of shit. I was sick and everything. And I remembered looking up and seeing stars like I'd never seen in my life, like the insane stars. I was like, you know, wobbling along, feeling sorry for myself. And I looked up and I thought, wow, there's nowhere else on the planet I'd rather be than this moment right now where I am. So I think it's appreciating the moment that we're in, no matter how hard it is at the time when you're doing it. And that overcomes the feelings of, you know, pain and everything else that when you're doing the ultra or whatever it is that you're doing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So Ray, some final words. Anything else that you want to add to this conversation?
No, if
this
anybody
is
has
your home right
questions,
here.
I mean, yeah, I love it. If anybody has any questions, or I'd love to take people's questions, and you know, I hope there's at least one. Yeah.
Yeah. So very inspiring. I've been following you for a few years, and I live in Chelsea too, so I understand the appeal of the trails and the opportunities that we get. That you know, it's right out of the front door. So yeah, my question is about the mental strength that it takes to get through something hard. So I'm signed up for my third ultra after 2 DNFs for the first 2 times.
Yeah, but right there that says you're made out of steel because you didn't finish the first 2. What the hell? Let's do it a third time, right? Yeah.
So what, like the first time, I think it was dark. It got dark. I missed the time limit time, and my frontal lamp wasn't working, so I just like gave up. The second time, I think I made it to the last aid station with 10 minutes over the time limit. Anyways, third time is a charm, right?
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Which one?
The Gaspésia.
Oh yeah.
100,
Okay.
50, the 54K.
I mean, why not do a hard one?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's hard. This
Yeah.
one's hard, but for the first time, they removed the time limit.
Because it's hard.
Yes, exactly. Because the DNF rate was like 40%. So, anyways, so I'm going back. This is my second attempt at Gaspésia 54K. So, and my question is, I'm training as hard as I can, you know, and with the D plus and getting in the hills and everything. What do you tell yourself mentally? Physically, you know, you've trained, you've done, you show up to race day, you show up to your adventure, you know, the start lines of your adventures, and you've done the training, but then you get going, and eventually things will get hard.
Yeah.
They do. They always do.
They always do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What do you tell yourself mentally?
You remind yourself that you were the one that did the bank transfer. You know? And it's part of the contract. The pain is part of the deal. And that, you know, all the greatest things that we do come with a high price.
Yeah.
And that's the price. And you remind yourself when you're out there that, hey, listen, I chose to do this thing. I'm out here. And as much pain as I'm feeling right now, I will be feeling elation when I get to the finish line. And I'm eating like a burger, if you're not vegan, that's this big, you know, at the end, right?
Yeah.
So you have to think about that outcome, but also in the moment that you're in this amazing place, you're in Gaspésie doing an amazing thing for the third time.
I think you were there last year, right?
No.
No?
No, I was at UTHC doing the coffee. No, yeah.
I was listening to a podcast. You were being interviewed. I think you went out one of the years, but maybe not last year, maybe the year before.
No, I've never been there. Never been to that race, but I've been out like in Charlevoix with my daughters 100 times. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's amazing, but it's tough. It's tough as
Well, good luck, and reach out if you need anything.
So my question is, have you been running long distance like that, like all your life, like as a teenager, like young adult, or was it?
I started running when I was 34.
34, and before that, like.
Before that, I was racing mountain bikes.
Okay, cool.
And before that, I was smoking a pack a day of cigarettes, basically, you know, doing nothing. Yeah.
The question is connected to other sports. Like, what are the, if there is, complementary sports with ultra?
All sports are complementary to ultra. All sports.
Favorite one?
Well, I will say this, that ultra running or running is the most purest of sports that we can do because we're connected to the earth while we're doing it, right? Like, I mean, we are doing things that we've been doing for thousands and thousands of years. All sports are fantastic. Now, there's a lot of Nordic ski people here, including Mo, and so I got Nordic skiing is the greatest thing in the world, and so, you know, no, I'm just kidding. No, but you know, yeah, and Ben with the Nordic, but you know what? So, but if running is your focus, and ultra running in particular is your focus, pick your races based on realistic expectations of what you can do based on our climate. We live in Mecca for Nordic skiing. We really do. I mean, everybody should Nordic ski. I hated Nordic skiing when I first moved here, and then I decided I was going to do Arctic expeditions, and I thought, oh shit, I got to learn how to ski. So then I started learning how to ski, and then I started to love it because this entire world we live in is a completely different world in the winter. It's an amazing world. So I used to just ice climb in the winter. That's all I did was ice climb. And in the summer I would run and mountain bike. So classic skiing in particular is very good for running because it's very similar motion. Skimo. Who's into skimo? Like literally one of the best things you can do for your ultra running in the off season is skimo. But then again, mountain biking is great. Swimming is good too because it lengthens your hip flexors. There's a million. Everything's good. Yeah.
What's your favorite trail in the park? Like
it's unmarked. Yeah. That's why I don't post on my Strava. Yeah.
So you said you only made the jump to like ultra running, you know, or your big expeditions 3 years after you started running. So what made you make that jump into like, you know, doing your regular 5 or 10K run to like going to ultra?
Well, that's a good question because this is going to sound, well, maybe it'll make sense now that you've all met me, but my first running race ever was the Yukon Arctic Ultra 100 miler. And so I'd never done a running race, but I was a very good mountain biker. I raced internationally mountain bikes and did well, but then I read an article about ultra running and I thought this looks amazing. And my brother's an amazing runner. He got me into all the sports that I do now. He's a very good climber, so that's why I started out climbing. And I thought, wow, I should tell him about this. And so I said, hey, there's this race where they run like 4 marathons back to back, like 100 miles in the Yukon. This is crazy. And he's like, yeah. And I said, but like the people that are doing it are like normal looking people. They don't look like the marathon runners we see in the Olympics. They look like us, you know? And I was like, you know what, dude? I think I'm going to do this. And I entered the race. And 2.5 months later, I was on the start line and almost didn't make it. But I not only finished it, I won it. And I thought, this is amazing that I could feel like literally at the halfway point, feel like a porta potty with feet. And then by the end, be feeling invincible. And I thought it's something about us that when we push ourselves beyond anything that we think we can do, we are emotionally, physically, and mentally, we are emancipated from barriers. Like we just are completely freed from any boundary. Like I learned that in that race. Like I was like, it's not a me thing. It's a human quality. All human beings can do way more than they think they can. It's just sometimes we find it out at different points in our lives, right? So from that moment I said, well, I have no idea how I won this race, but I want to know how I did this and could feel so good at the end. And being like the last few minutes, then I had to be carried off of the race course because I couldn't walk anymore. So I went around the world doing ultramarathons to learn about them and learn about myself. And then I met 2 guys that said, hey, we should run across the Sahara. And then we said, oh, that'd be great. And then Matt Damon heard about it. And then Pearl Jam and U2. Pearl Jam was at the screening of the movie sitting right in front of me. Eddie Vedder and Mike McCready right in front of me at the screening at TIFF. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to say something to him, but I didn't. No.
How much of a kick was it to kind of see this preparation and be like, oh shit, like this is a lot that I have to put in compared to like just going out for fun whenever I want to, because now you've got a goal in mind, right?
Yeah. Well, that first ultra, there was a buddy of mine that I was living over. You know the Mexican food and coffee shop? That was my apartment. I used to live in there, and I was living there, and a buddy of mine who would train with me. This was like maybe a month before we left for the Yukon in February, and I had a sled that I had all my stuff in for the race. And we ran out to the end of Meech Lake, crossed the lake. It was frozen. It was a cold winter. We did 60K that day, and I was walking. And I came back to that apartment, and I passed out. I had a futon. That's all I had. And I had a CompuTrainer for my mountain bike. And I laid on the futon, and I was immobile. Like I couldn't move for 2 days. My legs were so sore. And I thought, there's no friggin' way I'm going to be able to do that race, but I got it done, and in the process felt good, and I was blissfully ignorant of what was needed. So I don't look at training like you need to do 200 kilometers a week. You don't need to do 200 kilometers a week. When I was racing ultras and winning ultras, I was running maximum 110 to 120K a week of quality running and doing all the other stuff. Even now in preparation for expedition, I mean, expedition, the distances are crazy that we're gonna, like when I cross South America, in the jungle, we're gonna go through the jungle, the Andes, blah, 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 blah. It might be up to 100K a day some days, right? I'm not doing 150K a week or 500K a week or whatever for training. I'd stick to my plan. I do quality running. I make sure that I'm fit. I know my markers. I have trails in the park that I run, and I know my speed on those trails. And when, you know, and so I'm able to map out my training and know if I'm getting stronger or not, and build my endurance, etc. So I don't get hung up on the numbers. Is that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of.
Like
it's just I'm kind of in that in between state of I love running. I do, you know, around, you know, 70K a week, and I do it for fun.
Yeah.
But I'm also looking at YouTube videos of people doing ultras, and I'm getting like those goosebumps.
Dude, you should do it.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like I'm just like thinking, okay, like how much more will it imply for me to train?
Okay,
for
well,
that?
I'm training somebody right now that's doing their first 80K, okay? They're not running 80K every weekend. I'm gonna get them up to 60% of the distance, and that's it. Because here's the secret that nobody seems to ever talk about. If you can run 30K, you probably can run 40. If you can run 40, more than likely you can run 50, and if you can run 50, if you were pushed hard enough, you could run 60. So on and so forth to 80, right? So if you're able to replicate those long runs on the weekends, let's say you want to do 80, and you get it up to one weekend where you're able to do 60 one day, wake up the next morning and run 20, for sure you can run 80. Now, if you say, okay, hey, it turns out I'm pretty good at this, I want to be competitive. Now that's something a little bit different. But it's not about, like, it's never the things we think that are the most valuable. One of Elliot's workouts, beyond the nose breathing, that's been one of the most valuable workouts for him, is downhill repeats. Hike up Camp Fortune with your poles, put your poles away, and then hammer down as fast as you can, getting your body to relax. And so you're working on your technique and your eccentric loading, your strength, right, as you make your way down. Then when you're in the gym, you stand on here and you step down and you step back up, but facing this way. Eccentric loading, right? So it all follows suit. Now you're getting more competitive, right? You're training more specifically. Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. It was like I took everything I had. Like some of the early expeditions took absolutely everything I had. Now, running the Sahara was the first major expedition for me, the one we crossed the Sahara. And that was funded by Matt Damon, that whole crew. They funded the expedition. We had some sponsors and stuff. I can't remember. I think Nike and Gatorade at that time. But then through building relationships through the projects that I do, I was able to develop long-lasting partnerships. Like I helped Apple with the development of Apple Watch Ultra. I was one of the contributors in on that project. Canada Goose and other companies that have supported me for many, many years now. But when I went to the South Pole, which was like the third or fourth project I did, lucky my wife Kathy believed in it enough that we invested everything into that expedition. Everything we had to hopefully be successful in achieving the goal, and then leveraging that to hopefully get more sponsorship to drive not only what I do funding-wise for these expeditions that I do that are expensive to do, but the charity and everything else, like feeding my kids, all the rest of it.
What would you do when like sort of a saturated, not market, but there's a lot of people that are doing this? Like,
Yes, for sure. So if that's your goal and you want to make a life out of it, what I always say to people is don't try to, like when I started this, I didn't say to myself, well, someday I'll be a professional explorer and it's going to be great. You know, I just wasn't even thinking about that. I just didn't care. I just wanted literally to be happy. I was somebody who was a very unhappy person at pre-30 years of age. And when I changed my life, went from smoking sedentary to person who eats broccoli every day and runs, I wasn't searching ultra running, I was searching happiness. And my brother happened to be the vehicle to make that happen, who's an ultra runner and everything else that he does. If he was a carpenter, we talk about how to add an addition on here tonight, right? But that's not, I fell into this. But I tell people now it was a different time then. And now I've been doing this for so many years, so I've got a track record, 40 expeditions. It's easier for me, of course, to get sponsorship. But nowadays, it's not about the likes you have on social media. Nobody really cares about that. It's about the person that you are and the passion you have for a project. And I know some people your age, young people that are getting out there, getting after it, and doing some pretty crazy things and actually making a go of it. Like there's one young guy from the US, I won't say his name, but he was a Hoka runner, a professional ultra runner for Hoka. And he moved from Hoka to La Sportiva, and now he's a climber, professional climber, but he's a speed climber. Like he's like beating Killian's records. And I helped him out a lot in talking about stuff that he's doing. And he's made a career out of remaining authentic to what it is that he wants to be and do. And he draws everything else towards him. Like it just happens because he's so real when you see this guy, you can't help but want to support him, right? And other people see that too. And that's how it builds. You know what I mean? Instead of just posting a YouTube page and trying to get lots of views, it's not the way. Nobody cares anymore. Who's influenced by social media? Like social media influencer? I'm not influenced by anybody on social media, at least not that I know of, unless it's subliminal, you know? So really that whole gig is up. Does that make sense? It's really about going after it if that's what you want to make your living doing, finding those small sponsors to get you somewhere, giving you Aeroplan points so that you can fly to the destinations, reducing your costs, getting in-kind sponsorships, developing a resume of projects that you've done, then going after money. Yeah.
All right, any other questions?
I got one more.
Okay.
I get to run with this guy, super ultra runner, really good every week. Not near as good as him.
Guillaume?
Huh?
Guillaume?
Yeah, Guillaume. I'm Brad. But one thing that impresses me is we talks about being sort of comfortable in the uncomfortable. Like when it's the long projects and it's the go, because it's, you know, not necessarily super fast, but it's just going mile after mile. This is kind of hurting, that's kind of hurting, I'm kind of tired, I'm kind of bored of this now. And sort of like the mental charge for you just to keep doing mile after mile, moment after moment. What's that like for you?
Well, you know, I think everybody here sort of understands that. What's interesting is like what I do is no different than what anybody else here does. It's just extrapolated over a longer period of time. Do you know what I mean? Like we're all doing the same thing, more or less. Like hands up if you've gone running on a cold winter day because you had to because of your training, right? Like mostly everybody here. Hands up who's gone running on a day when you didn't want to go running, right? Yes, exactly, right? Okay, so I mean, we're all made of the same stuff. We all do the same stuff, and we're all very capable at varying degrees of being comfortable in discomfort, getting used to being uncomfortable. You're getting used to being uncomfortable for the 3rd time this summer, right? So, you know, you get practiced in being uncomfortable. Richard, when you're at the Hard Rock this year, your lungs are going to feel this big at the top of the mountain, right? But you're going to be saying to yourself, well, I better get used to it because I've got 155 miles to go of this, right? So you get comfortable by adapting to the situation that you're in. We're humans, human beings are amazing at adaptation. We're adapting machines. That's why if you go to the gym and you lift weights, you got to lift heavier weights eventually, right? Yeah. So pain and discomfort are the same way. The more you do of it, the more you get used to it. Yeah.
All right. That was a great chat.
Thanks, everyone.
Great questions.
Yeah.
Let's give Ray a round of applause.
Yeah. I'm, if anybody wants to, I usually get back to everybody. Ben knows. Eventually, I get back to everybody. It takes time. But just reach out to me I'm on all the social media platforms, so I'm easy to find. So, or a website. I have a website. Just email me. All right.
Really
Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
your time today, Ray.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, it's great. Thank you. I'm so glad we got to do this.